Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of the Hockey Writers Roundtable, season preview edition. We're keep running through the teams here. We got to the Buffalo Sabres and Jacob Strozyk. You've seen him on many shows. He usually does our previews here for the Sabres, also on Fantasy Forecheck. Jacob, how's it going today?
Oh, I'm living the dream. I'm ready for the season to get rolling. Let's get it started.
Yes, you may be watching this just the day before the season starts. Who knows when you guys will be watching this, but we're going to go through the Buffalo Sabres, do a bit of a preview of what's going to happen. Everyone knows the Sabres almost made the playoffs. They were probably the closest that they've ever been in a long time to actually breaking that drought, and it's gone on way too long. But they had a really good season, a very, very up and coming young team, a lot of good pieces for the future. So it's going to be exciting, I think, in the next couple seasons where they could be getting into the playoffs for the first time in a long time. But didn't happen last season. Didn't make a lot of changes to their forward group in the offseason. Really didn't do anything at all. Their defense, they did add a couple guys, which we'll talk about. But maybe I think it's just one guy actually. No, two guys.
There's two.
But yeah, it's going to be an interesting season. So Jacob, let's start off with the offense and talk about the forwards. Like I said, nothing new. They're returning quite a few players, but this will be the first full season for Jordan Greenway after being acquired. So he's maybe a new addition because he'll be right here right from the beginning. So let's start with forwards. What do you think about this offense going into the season? We already know the big guy, Tage Thompson, who scored a ridiculous amount of goals. But what do you think about the forwards going into the season?
Yeah, Greenway was a solid addition at the end of last year. So I think he's going to be given a good opportunity going into, 23, 24. He was kind of, you know, iffy at the start, kind of muddling through fourth line, third line. Then he got a couple of opportunities up on the top two lines when there were some injuries, and he made the most of it. So I think he's going to be given a real shot, and I think he's going to be a decent contributor. Not, you know, top tier 40, 50 points contributor, but I think it's his size and physicality that's going to be a big factor, considering Buffalo really lacked that, hitting and physical factor to their game. They were last in the league by a lot as far as hits goes. So, somebody like Greenway is a good step up in comparison to, maybe some other prospects that they have in their pipeline who are smaller that they could bring up in lieu of him. But I think he's great. Offense overall, like you said, it's the same. So I'm expecting the same type of result. It's just goals, goals, goals left and right between Thompson, Tuck, Skinner, Cousins. Quinn's going to be out for a little while, but you have Paterka who's still sitting there. Krebs is still ready to go. Okposo is still looking good. Olafson's still on the team, so there's still good amount of goals coming from there. So it's offense. It's offense all day.
Yeah, that they're not going to be starving for goals. That's for sure. They got quite a few guys that can score, and did so this past season as well. So I think it's just going to get better, and it's going to be fun to watch the offense. That's for sure. Moving on to the defense, again, most of the key guys are coming back. You got Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power leading the way. T.S. Samuelson, very good complementary defenseman. Yoki Haru's back. They did add a couple guys, though, in free agency. Eric Johnson, veteran, 35-year-old. He's been around the block a few times, former first overall pick as well. Connor Clifton, another maybe underrated signing, I think, coming over from Boston. So what do you think about this defense going into the season?
I like the additions that got made because it's that big core three up top, which was Samuelson, Dahlin, and Power, that kind of round out that top grouping. And they've really been struggling to find somebody to pair up with Power on that second line. They tried Yoki Haru a bunch of times, and it just didn't work out super well. They tried Lyubushkin for a little while, and it still didn't work out. Lyubushkin ended up getting traded about a week or so ago, so they moved on from him. So I like the addition of somebody like Clifton or even Johnson. I'm not sure if Johnson is really ready for that top four spot at the age that he's at. I think he's more of a third line contributing steady defenseman as opposed to a log 20 to 22 minutes on the second line type defenseman. I think Clifton would slot in better there despite being, a career third pair guy. I think he's ready for that opportunity, and again, the physical component that Clifton brings will give a new dimension to Power's game as well. So I think it's a good complementary system because he'll do the same thing that Samuelson does for Dahlin, which is sit back and let the other guy make the plays. And then you can play the physical game, you can play the defensive part of the game, and still have that good back and forth so you can transition for offense. So the right defensive players like Power and Dahlin can push up ice like they're used to.
Yeah, they do have some depth guys that could potentially come into there. I don't know how big of a chance they'll get, but Jacob Bryson, Riley Stillman are still in the mix. What do you think about that? Those two guys, are they going to have a chance of making it? I mean, one of them will be the seventh defenseman, obviously, but where do they slot in?
I think it's going to be a fight between them for that seventh defenseman slot. Personally, I like Stillman a little bit more just because of the size and, again, the physicality to kind of round out that bottom pair, or as the seventh D to kind of switch in, depending on either injury or maybe rest for Eric Johnson. So then Stillman, I think, would play better with somebody like Yoki Haru on that third pair, as opposed to Bryson, who, in my opinion, is just not up to snuff for the NHL still. I still think he's just a little bit behind it. I'm not saying he's a minor league player, but I think he's that fringe where he's a seventh, eighth defenseman. So he's kind of a rotational guy. I'm not sure if Buffalo will hold on to him if he wants to maintain that type of role, because he does carry, a decent cap. He's just under $2 million, so they could also move him. It's tough with Bryson just because of that situation, but I think Stillman edges him out for the seventh D spot.
Yeah, I mean, Stillman's played quite a bit. He was in Vancouver, got traded. I think a lot of people didn't see it. I mean, it's just like under radar trade. All of a sudden, I got at him, and he's interesting. I mean, he was in Vancouver here, and a lot of Canucks fans didn't really like him. They were happy when he was traded. So, I mean, I think he was miscast in Vancouver. I think he shouldn't have played as much as he did. But we'll see how he kind of does over a full season in Buffalo, how much he plays, but we'll see. Okay, goaltending. And this is where we're going to have some changes. Craig Anderson probably going to be announcing his retirement very soon. But he's not back in Buffalo, but they do got the up-and-coming Devon Levi. They got Eric Comrie. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is also in the mix. What do you think about this? It's maybe a three-headed monster going into this season. Who's the starter for one? I mean, Levi showed really well at the end of last season.
Yeah, it's a bit of a wild card. I think it's the biggest wild card for Buffalo this year. Anderson is retired. He did announce in his last game that he is retiring. Yes. So he's done. He's out of the question. But he was one of the best parts about last year to watch. It was just awesome to see him go off on so many games at that age. So that was fun. As far as who's the starter, people think it's going to be a bit of an internal competition between UPL and Levi, but I think Levi has the edge just based off of the performance and the determination alone. You watch the kid play, and then you also listen to him talk. He sounds like he's already owned the position for the past 10 years, and he's ready to just step in and continue being that guy. So were his numbers incredible and off the charts? No, but they were good enough that if you were paying attention and actually watching the game, you realize that the average stats weren't necessarily because he was playing poorly. It's because the team around him left him out to dry all the time. And it's the same thing with UPL's numbers. His were so inflated last year just because of how bad the defense was around him. Because if you watched him play, he had a couple of soft moments, but he also had a lot of really awesome goaltending moments. So I think it'll be a bit of a tandem as opposed to a starter backup style thing. But I think Levi is the one that kind of grabs that starting position out of the gate and will probably play the majority of the games this year. But I think it'll be close to maybe like a 45, 43 kind of split type thing. So if Comrie comes in, if he's not moved, I think it'll just be based off of injury. I don't really know if they'll commit to him full time unless one of the other two really starts to drop off. But even then, I'm not sure if he's the best pick for it. But Buffalo's had a goaltending carousel a few years in a row, so having him on the roster still as that third goaltender, it's not a terrible option because he's still good enough to be, that third or backup style goalie. But he's not going to knock your socks off and take the starting position. I don't think it'll be a tandem between UPL and Levi for that.
Yeah, I see that too. And they also got Tokarski still there too. He's a good depth option. He played quite a bit. Was it last season or the season before where he had that big run where he looked really
season before? Because last year he was Pittsburgh's. Dustin Tokarski is a menace to the NHL, and I absolutely love everything about him. And I'm so excited to have him back in the organization. Yeah. So that'll be fun to see. Hopefully we never have to bring him up for a game. That is the ideal situation. But if we do, I'll be sitting in the stands with the utmost confidence that we'll be fine.
Yeah, I've liked Tokarski ever since. He's great. I've loved him even when he was in junior way back, long time ago. So he's 33 now. I was surprised that he's that old. I mean,
it feels like just yesterday.
Yeah. All right. Talked about the three position groups. Now let's talk about the whole team as a whole going in. This division is getting really competitive. I mean, I've talked about this a few times where I'm thinking there's going to be a changing of the guard between, the top tier and the tier that's rebuilding, kind of Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, kind of flipping the script of the top teams that have been the top for a long time. Where do they stack up going into this season? Are they a playoff team or are they still kind of far away from that considering their development path right now?
I can say with extreme confidence that they are a playoff team. But you're absolutely right. The Atlantic Division is just so stacked beyond all imagining that even when you go by and you try and rank these teams, somehow I've seen Tampa as low as like 6, and I'm just like, it's not unrealistic, but they don't deserve to be down at 6 because it's still Tampa Bay and they're still a really good team. I think Buffalo stacks up probably as the number 3 team in this conference, just because I agree with you in the fact that there's going to be a bit of a changing of the guard. I think some of those older teams are going to start to phase down a little bit and come, into reality of, these younger teams, they develop and they're going to start just running over us a little bit, especially with all the experience that they've been gaining. So Buffalo, I think, will creep into that playoff spot and really hold it. But again, it's that, can they stay consistent and not go on random 8-game losing streaks?
Yeah.
that is the difference between playoffs and not playoffs last year, is just don't go on an 8-game losing. Go on a 7-game losing streak when you make the playoffs. Just don't go on 8-game losing streaks. And I think they can build that consistency this year and maintain it enough that they'll hold that spot.
Yeah, I see that too. I mean, they're going to be an exciting team, not just this season or next season, way in the future, because they have so many good prospects that are on the cusp of making it too, which we did Prospect Corner focusing on the Sabres, and that was a fun one. So check that out. If you want to know more about the prospects, check out that episode of Prospect Corner. Just we go into a lot of them in that episode. So, okay. Quick fire. This is a fun segment. We're going to go through a bunch of different questions where, a lot of these have been turned into articles of the Hockey Writers. So let's start with Breakout Stars. So 1 or 2 Breakout Stars for this season for the Sabres.
Working on this article as we speak.
There you go.
This is a good one. But I'll give you one that really stands out to me, and I think it's JJ Peterka. I really think he got all the right experiences in last year, and I think he's putting in the right work this offseason. I've seen so many different videos of all the different things that he's been working on, whether it's skating, his strength, his turning, his shooting. He's doing so much, and he had a great international tournament at the end of last year. So he looks like he's angry and he's ready to just burst in and start owning stuff. So I think Peterka is the biggest potential breakout for Buffalo this year.
Yeah, I see that. He had a really good season in the AHL last year too. So I think he's ready to do it. So I agree with that. Okay, a player that needs to bounce back from last season.
Bounce back, I'm gonna say it's gonna be Victor Olofsson. Even though he did have
Mm.
his career high in goals this year, he just didn't look like himself. He's sitting on the fourth line most nights. He's playing between 8 and maybe 10 minutes a night for a guy that is normally a goal scorer and a darn good one too. So I think if he's given the right opportunity, if he's used appropriately on the power play, and the Sabres actually fix their super one-dimensional power play, then I think it'll give him more opportunities, and I think he'll bounce back. I think his numbers will be about the same. I think the scoring will still stay pretty consistent with him, but I think he'll look better. I think he'll look more confident. I think he'll be skating better, and I think that'll make a huge difference going forward for his career, whether he's in Buffalo or not, because his contract ends after this year.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. Not stats wise, but just how he plays. So that's a good one. Okay. An X factor for this season. It doesn't have to be a player. It can be a situation like power play coaching, stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be a player.
It's goaltending. At the end of the day, it really is the goaltending that's going to make the difference. Can Levi, can UPL hold the fort down enough if the defense still isn't supporting them? I think the defense will improve. I think it'll help them out a little bit more, but they still are going to have to play the games and learn it along the way. And there's going to be a learning curve towards the start, and it's going to be a struggle. So if UPL and Levi can hold down that fort early on, I think it's going to be a nice home stretch going towards the end of the year.
Yeah, goaltending is going to be big, and for few teams actually in this division. But yeah, if the goaltending holds up, I think this team's really good for a playoff spot, like we've said already. So that's a good one too. Okay, let's talk about some rookies and prospects. Who's going to surprise and make the roster out of training camp? There's not a lot of spots to get to make the roster, but it could be a surprise. There's always is in training camp. So who do you got?
It's a tougher one because there's three that are really at that top of the list to break into it, and I think are ready. But if there's going to be one that does it, I think it's Kulik. It's Yuri Kulik. He had a fantastic, dominant year in the AHL last year, and I think he really took all the right strides to get a shot out of training camp. I'm not sure if he'll hold on to it just because of how many forwards Buffalo still has up top, and they would have to move a player either to the press box or just out of the organization to make a spot for him. But I think if he gets it, he'll get the right experience he needs, and he'll be a good contributing factor on that probably third line and maybe the second power play, because he's a very good power play forward.
Yeah. I love Kulik, so I'm hoping that happens too. he's I believe a few of us ranked him second or third in the prospect pool. So
I think I put him at 2 as well on mine, because I did their top 10 it's like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I had Benson at 1 and I had Kulik at 2.
Yeah, I think we were on the same. So there you go. Okay, a prospect to watch that, I mean, doesn't have to be make the NHL this year, but just in the system, someone to watch this season.
Tyson Kozak. I can't stress enough how underrated this kid is. He's a former 7th-round pick. He's not a light the lamp kind of player. In juniors, he kind of was in his second year, but as soon as he made it to the AHL, he just flipped his script and he turned into this grinding, pesty power forward that's just so fun to watch and pick players apart. He throws punches, he throws hits, he's great defensively. He is a premier penalty killer, and he's not flashy, so you don't really notice him. But if you watch him, it's somebody you would love to have on your team, and he's the kind of kid that when you're a consistent playoff team, you bring him up and he can round out that bottom 6 beautifully.
He's really emerged as someone to watch now. I love late round picks hitting too. So there you go. That's a good one. All right, this one's probably pretty quick. Who's going to lead the team in scoring on forwards and defense? Now, the defense could be a little bit interesting, but forwards, I'm already guess who probably it is.
Yeah, it's Tage. It's
Yeah.
there's no not really a question about it, but I think Tuck will give him a run for his money this year because the two of them complement each other so well, and when they continue to play with one another, they just feed off each other's points. So I think it'll make a good competition between the two of them. I think Skinner will still have another good year. I think he'll drop down maybe to like the 75, maybe 73 point range. Not necessarily point a game, but Thompson will lead it. I'm guessing I would say about 99, maybe 102 points at the high end. Realistically, he'll probably be sitting around 90. I would guess 50 goals, 40 assists.
That's a good one. And what about the defense?
While it potentially could be a competition between Power and Dahlin, at the end of the day, Dahlin's the one with the most ice time and the most opportunities. And he's the one that consistently plays a more offensive role. Power is a playmaker, but he's still a better, probably defender than Dahlin is just in his own zone because he's not caught up ice nearly as much. He sits back a little bit more. So Dahlin will lead the offense from the back end, and he'll probably be sitting around what he did this year in that 70, maybe 74 point range. And he'll probably drop another maybe 13 to 15 goals.
Yeah, I see that for sure. All right, let's go to trades. Trade bait. One player that could be traded before the deadline this year.
There's a couple of really good candidates for this. The simple answer is Bryson, but I think a bigger name that could probably get moved is Middlestat. He's towards the end of his contract, and if he really is producing up to what Buffalo wants him to, I don't think they'll move him. But if he's on a bit of a decline compared to what he did at the end of last year, I bet you they move on from him in order to make room for a younger player next year and maybe getting a piece to kind of make the right playoff push at the deadline. I don't think he's an early trade candidate. I think he's a deadline move to acquire something that they need at that time type deal.
Yeah, that Middlestat's gonna be one to watch. I think this season too is what could he do? I mean, he's still on that. We're not sure. Like, I don't think he's hit his potential yet. 24 years old. He's not old per se, but he's not young. So he's kind of in that range where you start having to see something from him. And we'll see what happens with him this season if he is out of Buffalo or not. All right, this one's a fun one. I love doing these ones. So a bold prediction or a hot take for this season.
Well, I've got a few. Probably my biggest hot take off of pure insanity and narcissism is Levi wins both the Calder and the Vezina. Bam, I said it. I don't care. Because if he does play well enough to actually win the Calder as a goaltender, because it's not easy, he's going to have to be throwing up probably 30 plus wins somewhere in like a 2.4, 2.5 goals against and maybe a 915 or better save percentage. That's, some pretty darn good numbers. And I think he could be in a Vezina conversation, especially considering how valuable those types of numbers would be to a team like Buffalo. Yeah. So if he wins the Calder, I think he's in Vezina conversation as well. So that's my big hot take.
That's a big one because this Calder race this year, my gosh, it's loaded.
Fun.
It is insane. Just to name a few of them: Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, those two big ones. You got Devon Levi in there. Who knows? Leo Carlson could be playing in Anaheim. I mean, Shane Wright. They're you just list them off. There's just so
Dustin
many.
Wolf in Calgary too. I'd argue.
Yeah, that even for the goaltending, there's gonna be some big things. So it's gonna be an interesting one. But I like that. I love Devon Levi, so that'd be awesome if he was able to do that. All right, thanks Jacob for coming on the show and previewing the Sabres. Before we get to leave, tell us where everyone can find you on social media.
Yeah, you can always find me on Twitter at Stros6 or X now, I guess. I still call it Twitter.
Yeah.
Sorry, Elon. But you can find me on either one at Stros67. You can always listen to the Fantasy Forecheck podcast. We normally release that on Mondays. So feel free to tweet at me about anything fantasy or Sabres, and I'll be sure to get back to you. We can sound off and have a fun little conversation.
All right. Well, make sure you're checking out Jacob's articles at the hockeywriters.com as well. And all of the Sabres writers over there, they're doing preview posts every day, almost every day. And to get prepared for this season that's coming up. It's going to be an exciting one for the Sabres. So, I mean, yeah, check it all out. Make sure you're giving this video a like. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Just throw those comments in the comment section below. You can answer those quick fire questions, and I mean, they're really quick to answer. So make sure you're doing that below if you want. And until next time, we'll see you on another Hockey Writers Roundtable.